Hi everyone. My name is Thorbjörn, here to talk a little bit about user acquisition for free-to-play games, but with a somewhat holistic approach. I love saying holistic, and good to be around academics as well. That being said, a lot of the lessons in here in terms of user acquisition, iterative marketing, data-driven decision-making, and these kinds of things also apply to most sort of software as a service type things. It's actually quite interesting to see now that we who are in the free-to-play gaming space there's sort of more and more companies who are starting to understand this and look at it quite a bit, and realizing that we are, in terms of user acquisition, optimization based on user lifetime value, etc., we're very much in the forefront. So companies like YouTube, Spotify, like these, who actually operate in somewhat of a similar environment, are starting to apply a lot of these things as well. So even if you're specifically not making games or free-to-play games, there could be some lessons here. However, the caveat would be that this is still mostly useful for service type offerings, so not necessarily products. If we're talking games, a lot of the things in here, for instance, for premium games do not really apply. And if you're selling something, a product with a fixed one-time transaction value, then sort of a different logic applies. So, all right, it worked. So this is me, Thorbjörn. I am from Sweden. I studied at Stockholm University, where I studied management and organization, mainly because I figured that was the topic that allowed me to do the most fun stuff and not too much economics and business and stuff. So we drank a lot of wine and read a lot of philosophy, but it ended up being very useful. I was with a startup in Stockholm between 2002 and 2006, a company called Spinbox, and we were doing mobile virtual network operators. So we were launching MVNOs back in the days when MVNOs were cool and considered to be a viable business model. We actually even launched an MVNO here in Finland. So I don't know, around 2004, 2005, if anyone remembers, Äätikioski had their own prepaid cards. So we were actually doing that. Like, that was our business model. Companies, brands, they came to us with a sack of money and say, we want to be a mobile operator, make us a mobile operator, and we took care of everything. So we launched MTV and a bunch of these companies who, back in those days, 10, 12 years ago, a lot of people thought, hey, I'm going to be a mobile operator. Everyone should be a mobile operator. Then I moved to Germany. So between 2006 and 2012, I lived in Berlin and got to experience, sort of also just from a startup perspective, what was happening there. It was pretty insane and a lot of fun, because in 2006 there were virtually no startups there, and now it's the most hyped startup place. I mean, it definitely has more hype than Silicon Valley if you look at what actually comes out of it, but it's still something a lot of people are talking about and looking at the companies there. I was at Jamba, so I am the one person responsible for Crazy Frog, and I take a lot of credit for ruining MTV as well. We spent a lot of money doing user acquisition for ringtones, mobile games, stuff like that. I was responsible for Northern Europe. So that was also a very fun lesson, because you learned a lot about people and what content consumption tells about people. How many of you here are from Finland? So like almost all of you. So it was pretty cool. I mean, I got verified data. It's maybe not news to you, but it was very fun to see sort of what kind of ringtones and mobile games people were buying in Finland compared to Sweden, Denmark, Norway. And we quickly realized that Finns like crappy 90s heavy metal and racing games. So, and I should mention as well, porn. Finns were crazy about porn compared to Swedes and Norwegians. After a couple of years at Jamba and just doing the user acquisition, marketing, and also the management of Northern Europe, I joined Vuga. Both of the two founders from Vuga, Jens and Philip, were at Jamba as well, and they left, started Jamba, and then I joined as the 12th person in 2009. Exactly as same as with Grand Crew, I was the first person to join the company who wasn't actually making games, coding, hacking, drawing, or doing stuff. I was more responsible for business development, marketing, and doing all of that. So I stayed with Vuga for 2 years. We built up the company. Then I decided to leave and ended up with Grand Crew. So you're all familiar with the Supernauts. You have an idea of what we're doing, and yeah, that's where we're at right now. So yeah, my career highlights, definitely Crazy Frog. That's was a lot of fun. At Jamba, I spent roughly $50 million on marketing for ringtones, mobile games, and stuff like that. The bulk of it was on TV, so I've actually done a ton of TV advertising. What was really good, a very good sort of learning, and what I think has given me an advantage in what I'm doing today is already back then we were working and optimizing on users' lifetime value. And we could also do direct response marketing that was measured and trackable. Right, so I don't know if anyone remembers these ringtone ads, but we showed 200 ringtone ads per day, but every TV ad was actually unique. So you ordered by sending X14, and in the next ad you sent X15 and X16, so we produced unique ads every time we were being shown, so we could actually accurately measure and evaluate the different TV ads. And back then, and even today, virtually no one else can do that. Right? If you're marketing Nivea or Mercedes, you pay a shit ton of money, you get a TV spot on the channel you want, targeting roughly the demographic. So if you're, if you're targeting, if you show your TV spot during, what's the UK car show? Yeah, with the annoying people. The hell is it called? Yeah, Top Gear, right? Yeah. So if you're, show your TV spot during Top Gear, well, you have a pretty good idea. You can guess yourself to who am actually watching this, and if you show it during Oprah, well, then you get a different thing. But we could really sort of measure and do all that. Yeah, and then with Wooga, we grew from 12 to 200 people while I was there. We raised $25 million in our Series A. Grand Crew, when I joined again, I was the 12th person there right after the initial financing round. We did a big financing round last year, and we have also been growing the company, albeit we have been much more slow, careful, and very picky in the people we've been adding, because we want to have a sort of a really super talented company. So, the core thing, everything I'm talking to you about today, everything what this business with free-to-play games and user acquisition for these types of companies that has a service primarily where a vast majority of your users will never pay anything, and the small percentage of them will generate all of your revenue. For all of these, everything comes down to this very simple equation. Lifetime value has to be higher than cost per install. And you can replace cost per install with, if you have a dating, for instance, dating websites, right? Exactly the same logic applies. Most people on dating websites never pay, but you're still paying to acquire enough users. And then, yeah, you just have to make sure that your cost per user or cost per whatever you want to have it, it has to be lower than your lifetime value on averages. And this is not as easy as you think. Right? When I was in business school, we were taught that there's a 20-80 rule in business. 20% of your users are 80% of your revenue or your profits, and that applies to a lot of different things. In our business with free-to-play games, and in most other businesses as well that are operating on this same level, you have a 5-95 rule, where 5% of your users are 95% of your revenue. And that just makes it oh so much more important to know who are these 5%. Why are they spending? When are they spending? And doing that. So it just puts much, much more emphasis on data, on analytics, and on metrics. And I'm going to be talking a lot about that today, because it is my strong belief, and we'll get to that later on as well, it's my strong belief now that marketing sort of I love Mad Men, right? Awesome show, really good, and it's cool showing everything, but that's not what we're doing anymore. Like marketing for online services in general, it's not cool guys or girls sitting around coming up with crazy ideas. It's not like that. You have something and then you test and you iterate and you iterate and you iterate. So it's become much more of an engineering-like process. And this is, again, something I've been doing now since 2006 at Jamba. Even back then, we were being very iterative in everything we were doing. It was a German company, so us foreigners, we love to make, it's super fun to make fun of Germans. And it's very easy as well. They're very thankful to make fun of. But we were always saying, like, well, bloody hell, like, we're not doing marketing, we're actually doing marketing engineering. It's Excel-driven marketing, and it's doing that. But that's kind of what works. Ugh. I should say as well, while I take a sip, feel free to at any point interrupt me, or not interrupt me, but raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. The more interactive these things are, the better in my experience. Plus I don't have to hear myself the entire time. Oh, well. Yeah. So, as I was saying before, cost per install, right? That's all what it comes down to. How much are you paying to get a user? There are so many companies, maybe not so much the last 2 years, but 3, 4, 5 years ago, everyone was just saying, let's build something and then we'll go viral. And no one had any idea what viral meant. It becomes synonymous to get shit for free, but you're not getting shit for free in most cases. I'll make a point of only mentioning Flappy Bird once, so I'm going to mention it now. I mean, of course, there's always like things that stand out. There's outliers, things that just jump out of nowhere and do that. But you can't engineer that, you can't design that, and you can't expect that. Because for every Flappy Birds, there are 100,000 failed, equally good, equally interesting, equally cool things. Like it's more like a meme than anything else. In this user acquisition thing, it has been a very clear and visible development in how the logic has shifted. So a couple of years ago, online marketers or user acquisition agencies, everyone was just talking on CPM when you were doing it online. Cost per 1,000 impressions. It's the dumbest acronym you'll ever come across. M is actually mil, so they, for some reason, God knows why, threw in Latin there. So cost per mil, and mil is 1,000, so cost per 1,000 impressions. That was all everyone cared about back in the day. How many impressions, how many people are going to see my ad? And then people started realizing, well, that's actually completely irrelevant. I don't give a crap how many people see my ad. And then the thinking evolved a little bit, so people started saying, aha, views are not important, clicks are important. So then all of the focus came on CPC. And that's where Facebook and Google, when they started doing their online advertising, that's when they sort of started growing. And with CPC, you have a clearer CPC lends itself better to an auction system for bidding, like Google and Facebook and most of these online advertising networks work on. You just make a bid. How much am I willing to pay for 100,000 clicks? Now it has evolved, or up until recently, it has evolved towards cost per install. So now you're actually just, with many ad networks, you're just paying for a user to install your game. So this means that a lot of the risk has been removed from you as the advertiser to the actual advertising networks, the agencies or whomever it is. You can go to someone and say, here's $10,000, I want to have 10,000 users, I'm willing to pay $1 per user, you go ahead and fix it, I don't care how you do what you do, just sort that out for me. Now, today, it's becoming more and more focused on cost per engaged user, meaning just having a user install is kind of not enough. And it also lends itself, just as CPC does, it really lends itself to fraud, which is always, if you're doing online marketing or online user acquisition, fraud is always a huge issue. Like if you're, for instance, buying on CPC like people did back in the day, well, then there are click farms. I have a website, I get paid for every time someone clicks one of my ads, I get paid. Why not program a bot that just clicks my ad from different IPs 100,000 times per day? And like this is still to this day, these are very big issues. Now, as the marketing technologies become more advanced, so does the scammers and the fraudsters. And they tend to always be smarter and be able to move faster than the ad networks. And I mean, they're to some extent running circle around Google as well. And there have been news ads recently where both sort of Supercell and King.com, or King, they're rebranding, so you're not allowed to say King.com. I'm going to refer to them as the assholes from now on because I don't like them and what they're doing with trademarks. So Supercell and the assholes, I mean, they have had issues in the press where they pay people to generate users for them, and these people use really shady tricks. Like you click on an ad that you load a web page that automatically takes you to the App Store, and they're doing hacks and runarounds and generally smart stuff, but not necessarily the most effective for the advertiser. So now more and more people are focusing on cost per engaged user, which means I'm not willing to pay $1 for an install, but I'm willing to pay $2 for a user who plays my game at least 3 times. And then you share data with your advertiser, so you put a tracking pixel inside of the game that lets the advertiser know every time a user logs into the game that advertiser has generated. And that also allows them to optimize throughout their ad networks, where do I find users that keep coming back to this game? But all of this, again, is kind of irrelevant. Anything that matters is ROI, return on investment. If I spend $100, how much am I getting back? If it's less than 130, I'm losing money because Apple takes 30%, or I'm not good at math, 28 or whatever. Well, never mind. But I mean, that's really all that matters. So I keep, you know, I speak at a lot of conferences, and I always get this question, usually from smaller developers, like, what's a good CPI? How much are you willing to pay for a user? And I'll gladly pay $1,000 for a user as long as that user ends up spending $1,500 in my game. So having these sort of strict targets and sort of locked in thinking that still a lot of big companies and a lot of online advertisers do, it's completely detrimental to the business you're doing. Your business is based on 5% paying in your game or in your service. There's actually no upper limit to what they are spending. So why limit yourself to a CPI? Then, for reference, you always end up with having average CPIs. So in Germany, you know that on average, this is how much a user costs. You can break that down. The more users you have, the more money you're spending, the better you tend to get at it because you get more data. So you start to see, well, okay, how much does a 25-year-old German female cost? And how much does a 45-year-old French male cost? Because these are demographic data that you often get. And based on that, you can also often make assumptions about how much they will be spending. So, LTV, right? Lifetime value. Again, there are simple and more complicated ways to look at it. And you know, if you are doing this type of thing, the more successful you want to be, the more advanced you have to be in your thinking about these things. So the very basic definition of lifetime value is how much revenue has this user generated. Very easy. Even the dumbest company can figure that out. They take a user, they see how much has this user spent. I have this user's lifetime value. And if I then know their geographic location, I know their gender, I know their age, you can, I mean, very easily just, in Excel, no advanced maths or anything like that. You know, you just pull that data up and say, okay, females in Germany spend this much. Females under 25 spend X, females over 25 spend Y, and you get all this data and you can map that out. A better definition that most really successful companies, or companies who are really, I should say, not necessarily successful, but companies who are really good at this, you have an advanced definition where you look at lifetime value is revenue plus generated virality. Sorry, that second plus shouldn't be in there. And by generated virality, I look at, you know, I bring in a user, I look at how much money does this user spend, and then I look at how many other users have this user generated for me. By posting on Facebook, by sending invites, by doing all these things. You can look at the game Candy Crush from the Asshole company, and so to see that they have, you know, they have very clear gates, right? You get to a certain point where you either have to pay or you have to send invites to people, and if you know, that's a way for them, and they keep very close track of that, so they can see, well, here's a guy who is generating a lot of users for us, and those users end up spending money. We should actually attribute this to the sort of originating user. So you take that logic to it. Then you can even do, depending on your game, it's something we will be doing a lot of. We look also at in-game value created. So for us, you've all played Supernauts, as promised. So you know our game is all about creativity, doing cool stuff, building awesome places. And it's actually really important for us to have a lot of users who build really cool and good looking stuff. Because that's the stuff that ends up on YouTube. That's what gets people talking about the game. So that actually has quite a big value for us. So we're actually even trying to keep track of this. So even if a user never invites any other users directly or spends any money, it can be an extremely valuable user for us because they keep doing really cool stuff and they keep recording videos and they keep being active and doing all that. So that's sort of the first soft value that you as an analytics or a marketing person has to apply to it and try and quantify, definitely update what is the value of this, what is the value of that, but that's something that tags along to it. So some examples, right? Like I mentioned before, if you look at Candy Crush, the simple lifetime value, revenue generated from boosters and unlocks. Simple, basic. You can also differentiate from where it is. Advanced lifetime value, revenue generated other users generated, and the revenue generated by those users. And then you could, in theory, even extend this. So you can look at the users generated by the users generated, and etc. You can keep extending this, but at a certain point, you're just, extending for the sake of extension. So I'm a big fan of not moving beyond the second level. Make sense? Right? Okay, cool. So, and as I mentioned in Supernauts, revenue generated, users generated, viral content, right? That's where things come in from us. Users generated by viral content. So we're actually going to try and keep track of, if a user posts a lot of cool videos to YouTube of our game, we're going to try and find a way to figure out, well, okay, this is a user that actually influences the creation of other users, and then attribute the value to that. So we can know who are our people who spend the most money, who are the people in our game that generates the most users for us, and who are the people that generates the most nice, cool, exciting content. It's going to be very tricky, but fun. I promise you, even if you're like marketing freaks and like marketing, this is actually much more fun, I think. Well, yeah. Yeah?
So you try to please those users more that actually post stuff from your game, basically. You try then make them like your game more, or
yeah, sure. I mean, we already have we have a person in Canada, and she tends to be on the top of the charts in our game, who's just building crazy stuff and doing that. And we've already sent her a message, hey, thanks for liking our game, here's a t-shirt. If you have any questions, let us know, Look at that. But it's also important, not just on the individual user perspective, but if we see that, it's quite the likely scenario that the people who will generate the most cool, crazy stuff in our game, it's very likely that they will be Minecraft players. Which means it's probably pretty likely that they're relatively young men. So maybe those people end up being super important for us to generate cool content, but they're probably not going to be users that spend a lot of money because they don't have a lot of money. They're on their parents' iPad or doing something like that. But knowing who those people are, because patterns emerge. If you have more than 50,000 users, you have enough data to try and make some statistical conclusions based on, well, okay, people who maybe people over 30 won't post videos at all, or it will be much less likely for them to do so because God knows what reason. But keep knowing that, so not just dealing with the individual user, but also telling us that, even though 15-year-old boys end up not paying much in our game, if we do a marketing campaign targeted towards them, then we will probably get a lot of users who generate a lot of cool content for us. They're online a lot of times, so maybe we'll find that women between 20 and 30 are the people who likes to visit other players the most and leave messages and give feedback, and that makes the game feel more alive, so that in and of itself has a huge value. So it's finding those things out. So in a way, knowing what you're getting and not just looking at the money you get back, but having a deeper understanding of it. And again, like if we take Spotify as the example, maybe someone who doesn't even subscribe to Spotify but generates a lot of playlists. Like maybe there's someone who loves doing, my 90s mixtape playlist, and that playlist ends up generating a lot of users. Or there's someone with a Spotify Tumblr who posts track of the day or whatever it might be. Like those users can be super valuable. So you need to figure out who are they, what are they doing, is it worth for me to try and spend money to get more of these types of users, even though they might not end up spending any money in my game? Okay? Yeah?
Yeah, so something like tying LTV into sort of a time horizon, right? Because essentially, basically an LTV is, we should talk about the whole lifetime of the player, right? Say 2 years, 3 years, whatever, how long they play.
Yeah.
But when you're doing user acquisition, you don't basically necessarily have the data if you have a 2-month-old game, right?
Yeah.
So then you go into projecting and so forth. But so how much data do you need if you want to calculate an LTV without taking into some crazy behavioral algorithms, etc.?
So, awesome question. Thanks. And I mean, this is the trickiest part of it, because there's a lot of people out there who are huge fans and proponents of predictive analytics that claim to say if you within a player playing your game for 1 hour, I can predict their lifetime value. And I personally believe it's complete bullshit. A lot of people much smarter than me totally believe in it? I don't, because I think it's so different. But I mean, the approach we're taking is, and what I think most companies are doing, but it differs here as well. You know, this is where your innate sense as a gamer or someone who has a good understanding of your audience, you have to just make assumptions. Like for the first 60 days, we track very closely when people spend, how much, how often. But after that, you know, first of all, after 60 days, a very small percentage of the, you know, the people who started playing on December 1st, a very small percentage of those players are still playing today. So after a while, you kind of, you know, the data becomes unreliable because the sample size is so small. But I mean, it is the inherent problem with lifetime value is, well, you actually don't know what it is until the lifetime ends. And you don't know when the lifetime is ending. Right? When I was at Vuga, we had a game that was, I mean, I was almost 2 years while I was there. We were running the game Monster World. Facebook game, kind of similar to Farmville, basic appointment gaming, plant, harvest, return, sell, etc. And our lifetime values, of course, it just kept increasing and increasing and increasing. And we were looking, it's the same thing with retention numbers. Right? You know, after 3 months, you have a 90-day retention value. But after half a year, you have a 180-day retention value. So it just keeps growing and keeps growing. So you have to be agile. You have to keep, keep extending it to a point. At some point, it becomes irrelevant, because at some point, the only people who are still there are the ones who are crazy engaged about it, spending a lot of money, doing all that. So then you just know that, you know, people who stay longer than X immediately become very high-value customers. So it's very tricky. Again, you can get into predictive analytics, and a lot of these companies, you know, they have super smart data scientists and Wall Street people who know what fractals are, and, you know, looking at all that. I still think it's, I mean, I know for us, with Supernauts, it's not going to work, because our game is so complex and there's so many things happening there, and every game session gives you 1,000 data points that you can analyze until you lose your hair. If you look at a game like Candy Crush, I think maybe predictive analytics can provide good value, because it's a much more straightforward game, it's much more simple, and you can look at, you know, if a player reaches level 7 in their first game session, it's probably very likely that they get really addicted to the game, and you can try and draw conclusions on that. For a game like ours, or for a game like SimCity, or a game like World of Warcraft, or something that is much richer, deeper, and more complex, I think this is much more difficult, and yeah, I just think predictive analytics becomes much less valuable there. And then there's also the thing, and I'm no statistician by any means, but when you have so much data, like all of these games have, even Candy Crush, all of these games, we have so much data, because we track everything that happens in the game. Every time you launch the game, every time you click a button, you open the shop, everything is stored. So you have so much data that the key challenge is not to, I mean, the key challenge becomes to figure out what data should I ignore? What shouldn't I look at all? Because when you have that much data, you can find correlations everywhere. Red-headed people, they, you know, finish level 8 before blondes. Because it's going to happen when you get enough data like that, you're going to find those things. But then you have to be very critical and say, is this a correlation or is this a causality? Right? Did this actually cause this, or is it... Okay, now again, I'm not a statistician, so maybe I'm screwing this up with everything. But I mean, just because something happens, that doesn't mean that redheads are better at beating level 7. It just might be a statistical anomaly that pops out. And if you have 10,000 data points, you're going to find statistical anomalies all over the place. So it's, you know, comes down much more to being critical and just really deciding which data, what data is good for you. So this is my one of my other key points, and it's kind of something again, a lot of this I'm going to be all over the place, left and right and back and forth. But I am a huge believer that user acquisition is becoming increasingly relevant as a skill. When we were doing marketing for ringtones, there was actually quite a fair amount of skill involved. Some people were better than others in terms of, you know, how fast should the speaker voice be, and what colors should we use, and which content should we choose, and what's the message in doing all that. But now that, everything we do is online, so everything is trackable. And that means that having sort of this, again, the Mad Men touch, the Don Draper blessing, kind of doesn't matter anymore. Because you can easily, by just not spending very much money, you can test 10,000 different ads. You go to an agency and say, here, make 10,000 different banners, test them, take the 5% that perform the best, make another 10,000 variations based on those, and keep testing and keep testing and keep testing. So it's sort of the marketing skill, the know-how, the feeling for design, image composition. Copywriting is completely irrelevant at this point. I used to hate working at Jamba because everything we wrote had to be 160 characters and less because of the SMS text. Right? So they had to, everything we wrote had to fit in a SMS. So we became very good at writing short and succinct messages. We had a huge poster in our room where it said, remove needless words, and then needless was sort of stricken through. Because it's actually, it's a needless word, so just remove words. Then when I was at Vuga, we were doing tons and tons of Facebook advertising. Facebook actually only allows for 132 characters. So I thought Jamba and SMS text were horrible. Then you go to Facebook, which is even worse. And now if you're doing mobile user acquisition for an iPhone or an Android, it has to be so little text. So for every bloody game, new free awesome game. Boom, that's it. Like you can have the smartest copywriter or whatever writer in general, no one will come up with something that beats free awesome game, try now, new free game, super fun, like these very basic things and just combine them all. So you can take basically 20 adjectives, a few verbs, a few subjectives, and just throw them into a random generator and it will spit up things. And then you iterate and you test. It costs so little to test it. Then you figure out what works and you sort of build on that. So the point here is it's becoming a commoditized skill. And also if you're doing this at a big scale, which free-to-play gaming, it is a sort of size-driven economy. You get enormous benefits of scale. The bigger you are, the easier it's become to stay big or maybe grow even bigger. If you're starting out a small company with little funding, you're pretty much screwed if you want to do free-to-play. So if you're a small gaming startup, I tell everyone, don't do free-to-play. Because A, you need to have data people who really understand that. You need to be so focused on analytics that you have to be about half of a game company, half of an e-commerce company, and have that kind of skill set. So if you want to be a small gaming startup, unless you have a really talented people so you can raise a ton of money and then build on that, then I would suggest start doing premium games, because then you can remove a lot of these analytics and you can actually just focus on making a really good game. And then hopefully, that of course, making premium games, that has a whole different set of problems, but yeah. But this means again, like analytics skills have become so much more important than marketing skills. With my marketing teams, both at Vuga and also now at Grand Crew, no one in that team or none of the people I have trained or built up in my team, none of them have ever done marketing before, ever. I just look for really smart people. That's all I need, and then you can train. You don't have to know Photoshop or have a sort of graphical thinking mindset or be a good copywriter. Doesn't matter. You need to be really smart. You need to be good with Excel. You shouldn't hate math, although the math is kind of not that hard. It's multiplication, division, percentages, so it's relatively basic stuff, unless you slept through high school. It's basically high school or gymnasium level math, nothing more than that. I suck at advanced math. But you need to be good at Excel, you need to know what a pivot table is, you need to know how to work with these things, set up some formulas and do some of that, and just have a very analytical mindset in general. Yeah, and then, again, user acquisition has become data-driven and a very iterative process. Right? With these, if you look, for instance, at Facebook advertising, a couple of years ago, again, at Vuga, we were doing all of our Facebook advertising ourselves. And we were constantly benchmarking ourselves towards the companies who said, we're the best in the world at doing Facebook advertising. That's all we do. We're doing analytics and every time we kicked their asses. They didn't come close to getting the results that we got when we did it ourselves. But now that has changed. Because now there are big players who have already shown 10 billion ad impressions, or 50 billion ad impressions, or I don't know how many ad impressions, but a lot of them. And these companies are not really marketing companies, they are data companies that happen to do marketing. So they apply that mindset to it, and they learn from that. And that's again where the scale comes in. So it's all about testing, 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 and analytics, analytics, analytics. So, I mean, that being said, user acquisition is still tremendously important, but you can't, today you can't build a successful company by being good at user acquisition. You could do that a few years ago. One argument could be that Zynga, they succeeded because they were incredibly good at user acquisition and analytics, maybe not so much in the game department. Now it doesn't work like that anymore. You have to be able to make really good games. User acquisition, again, external parties can do it better than you can. So I've gotten rid of my ego and said, well, we're not going to do that much of it. We're going to work with the best partners. We're going to test them and benchmark them against each other. And we're going to focus on analytics and understanding what our players actually do in the game. So that is, in my opinion, becoming the role of the marketer in a game company or in one of these service providing companies. Specifically for, I don't know how, I mean, this course is free to play. So specifically, if you're doing free to play on mobile platforms, extra specifically if you're doing it on iOS, there is a big problem with attribution. And it's getting worse by the day. And attribution means knowing where a user came from. Which is, if you're doing, if you're doing marketing, it's really important to know, did this user come from ad network A or did it come from ad network B? Or did it come from my Facebook campaign or did it come from my other campaign? And this is a really big issue because of the way the whole ecosystem works. It is in a way kind of infuriating because Apple could solve this like that. I've told Apple many times, an intern can solve this problem in 8 hours. But the thing is, Apple doesn't really want to solve the problem. So you have an issue where if you are, for instance, Supercell, who are spending tons of money, they're showing ads absolutely everywhere, it becomes increasingly hard for them to know which user came from which campaign. And in many instances, 2 different advertising companies will claim the same user. Because many of the advertising companies, they say, if a user click our ad and then install the game within 1 week, we generated that user. Pay us for that user. So if a user is a heavy gamer, which a lot of the iOS people are, and you're playing hill climb racing, and then you go over and you play Candy Crush, and you're jumping between these games, you're probably clicking actually quite a few ads. CTRs on iOS in particular are actually quite high. People click a lot of ads. There's a lot of good looking ads, and people who like games, they want to find more games. So they keep clicking through there. So it's quite likely that a user can click a Clash of Clans ad from 3 different ad networks and then end up installing the game. And then you can't really say who actually did it. And then you might have to pay for it several times as well. So the way to solve this would be quite simple. If you added some parameters to the URL that leads to the App Store, because you have your game on the App Store, every ad you do, it points to the App Store, and then the user installs the game. If you could add 3 or 4 parameters where you can just tag X, 4, 16, and 28, and then you keep track yourself. X is Facebook, 14 is this campaign, 28 is this ad. Then you would have complete transparency and attribution. But Apple hasn't done this. And I personally have now, I'm completely convinced that they don't want it because they don't want to have Apple do not want to have a marketing-driven app economy. Like, they are hippies still, a lot of them, and they're really cool, altruistic people. I think the best example of that is actually from here in Helsinki, Frogmind, like the guys who made the game Badlands. from what I have heard, is basically someone at Apple found the game, started playing. It's like, oh, this game is so awesome. We should feature it. So they were basically sitting at home, and all of a sudden the phone calls and it's like, hi, this is Apple. We want to feature your game. And then they feature it. They blow it up. It becomes Game of the Year. They make millions and millions and millions because Apple found a game like, this is an awesome game. This is the kind of stuff we want to show. We don't want to show another Clash of Clans clone or a Puzzle and Dragons 46 or another game about throwing birds at things. Like, this is cool, this is unique, it looks awesome, this is the kind of stuff we want to show. Another issue with another thing with the attribution thing, it leads to SDK swamping. So an SDK is a service development kit, which most of these ad agencies want to place in your game. So they work with very different attribution models. It could be redirect. So when you click on an ad, before you get to the App Store, you actually bounce by their server. And then they say, okay, this phone was on our server at 11:15. At 11:16, this phone installed the game. It's our user. So you actually share some of your data with the ad networks through the SDK that's inside the game. But everyone wants to have their SDK in there. So it's not uncommon for some games to have 30 or 40 different SDKs put in your game. And every SDK is a couple of lines of code. It's something that can go wrong. It can have impacts on loading times, etc. So it becomes and also, like, a lot of these SDKs, they keep being updated, and then you have to update it, which means you have to submit your game to Apple. You have to wait 1 week for it to be approved by Apple. Then people, before at least people had to actually go and download the update. Now it happens more automatically. So yeah, it's a big issue. The way to solve this, which most companies does, is you work with third-party attribution software. So there are now a couple of big companies who do nothing but help game companies and mobile app developers identify where a user comes from. So the best one, in my opinion, and the one we are working with, is MAT, Mobile App Tracking. So they have their own SDK that sort of aggregates all the other SDKs. So you put one SDK in there, and then you can work with 60 different ad networks without having to put their crap in your game. You just say, we use MAT, you use MAT, let's use MAT for it. And there's a couple of others as well. AdX, based out of UK, Koshava, and there's a couple of others. And they all of these companies pretty much exist because of this market imperfection or the technical limitations of the ecosystem that are in place right now. But even with these, you should expect between 5 to 15% uncertainty, where you can't actually say where a user came from. And again, if you're doing analytics, 5% of your users mean the world to you. This 15% is actually quite the pain in the ass, and it's annoying and hard to deal with. How are we doing on time?
Good.
Good?
15 minutes on break.
Oh, good God. Oh, yeah, right. I can see the time there. Yeah, so this, if you're in my line of business, this is the kind of stuff you see every day. So I just did a very quick and different things. Every day there are new reports, there are people writing about, CPI prices are rising, up here, up this. This is, it's about more than half a year old. Here you can see a chart of average CPIs. And a lot of people who don't think about return on investment, who don't place the premium value on return on investment, tend to just stare blind at this. And this is sort of more of a warning, like, again, this stuff really doesn't matter. If your game is good, if your service is good, if your app is good, you need to make sure that you make the money you spend back. Then if you spend 7 euros to get 20 euros, or if you spend 3.5 euros to get 10 euros, doesn't really matter. It all comes down to the ROI.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Is the distribution here fully correlated with the LTV in different countries? Or what does pull the cost?
Yeah, it tends. I mean, yes. It's very funny for us. At Jamba, when we were making ringtones, the 2 countries where we made by far the highest ROI were Norway and Australia. which especially Norway I totally understand, because as a Swede we always say Norwegians have much more money than intelligence, so it's a great market. Like they're dumb and they're rich. Mwah, perfect. Australians I'm very confused by, but it's still the same, and also in terms of monetization. Like if you guys saw the Supercell, they got hacked earlier this week, and some person posted screenshots from their internal metrics dashboard. Australia had the highest ARPDAU out of them all. But overall, both cost per user and revenue per user correlates almost one-to-one with gross domestic product. So you can actually just map that out, and it tends to be a one-to-one correlation with maybe a few exceptions. Maybe Luxembourg and tiny countries, forget about those. I mean, they're too small. But I mean, yeah, the discrepancies here are, for instance, Austria and Switzerland should be a bit higher because they are very high GDP countries compared to the others. Germans in general really don't like to pay for stuff, so that tends to push them down, even though they have sort of a strong economy. But overall, that tends to be it. Canada is actually not in this chart boost survey or thing, but Canada actually tends to be the most expensive country by far, actually, because that's the perfect test market where everyone wants to test their game. So there's always a lot of sort of products, including ours, Supernauts. We do our beta in Canada still. It's live in Finland, but we're using Finland more to get qualitative data, and we have so many friends and families and people in the industry that we know here. So we said, well, okay, let's launch in Finland because we know we're going to get really valuable qualitative feedback. Game designers we know call us up like, hey, send us long emails and give us very, very good feedback. And Finland is also a smaller country, so we figured, well, this could actually be an interesting market to get a relatively high penetration, because having sort of pretty much the strongest indicator of if a player will keep playing your game is if that player has friends playing it. Like that is super valuable, because you get sort of psychological effects of reciprocity. It's the hardest word. Reciprocity. Giving back, right? If I go and log in and I leave a gift on your farm, there's something in our brain that says, oh, Thorbjörn gave me something, I'm going to give him something back. And then it also generates very sort of good push notifications and stuff like that. So having a lot of people within the same social group playing a game is tremendously valuable. It also explains a lot of the success of, for instance, Candy Crush. And that's also why a lot of the games like Candy Crush or Diamond Dash from Vuga or Jelly Splash from Vuga or these types of games, they always visualize where you are. Right? If you think of Candy Crush, you have the world map. You can see where you are, you can see where your friends are, and that's to trigger you to keep playing or to try and catch up with them. So it just triggers a lot of our psychological effects. But yeah, Canada overall tends to be the most expensive. There are some pretty cool, sort of weird-ish countries that tend to be very good. Brazil is doing really, really well. Russia, iOS and iPads in particular are exploding there. It's becoming very, very popular. Japan now is the second biggest country for Supercell in terms of revenues, and that's relatively new as well. Japan and Korea. I mean, China, of course, as well, but I mean, China is China. I would say China is just like the rest of the world, except everything is different. So, I mean, China just operates by itself. Japan and Korea are, in many ways, relatively westernized, there are a lot of similarities to Western countries, but both Korea and Japan have very specific market conditions that go back 15 years. If you look at mobile operators, you look at handset developers, the way they have been using mobile internet for many, many years. So there are some differences there, but at least in Japan, Apple is really getting very good momentum now there as well. iPhones, the iPad mini has been hugely important for Apple to sort of crack Japan in a way. So, which leads us back to this. There are no high CPIs, only low LTVs. And there's so little you can do, really, to affect the CPI. On a micro level, there are a lot of things you can do. If you know someone if you are good friends with other game developers, you can do direct deals with them, etc. But it's not something where you can build a big, sustainable and scalable business model on. So there are always, of course, exceptions, but at the end of the day, what you need to do is you need to improve your lifetime value. And that's why I mean, it's a question that annoys me the most, that everyone is discussing at every conference, saying, oh, the CPIs are too high. I have a great game, but I can't get any users because the CPIs are too high. Well then, you know, sorry to be harsh and everything, but consider it either capitalism or evolution or whatever. But you know, if someone can afford to pay $5 for a user and you can only afford to pay $2 for the user, well, these guys, the guys who are paying $5 are kicking your ass. They're not burning money, they're making that money back. So all comes down to trying to really improve your LTV, your lifetime values. And I think maybe it's a little earlier than 6, but this is a very good breaking point, I think, because the next half is much more about lifetime values than about the actual acquisition part of it. Right, so the first part now has been very much about marketing, a lot about analytics, and me just talking crap as always, a little bit of that as well. And the next part is going to be much more about lifetime value, how to work on that. It's going to be a little bit more, and I'm going to keep rehashing some of the points about acquisition and CPIs and do that. But before we get into that, I wanted to tie on to 2 things and maybe elaborate a bit more on those that I mentioned in the first part. The first thing would be in the advertising sort of ecosystem, who are the different players? What is a publisher? What is a third-party attribution software? And I'm going to try to explain it. And it's a bit tricky, and I don't have a slide for it. So, and I'm very bad at interpretive dance, so I can't do it that way either. But so the way virtually all companies work is you have someone for third-party attribution, and that company does nothing except tell you where your users come from. Right? So that's what they do. They are a technology provider that helps you solve a technical problem. Then you have someone who is selling you inventory, which is what you want to buy when you're doing acquisition. You want to buy ad inventory. You want to show your banner inside a game or on the mobile web or wherever it's good for you. So either you can buy that directly, right? So you can go directly to a game company. You can go directly to Fingersoft and you can say, hey, I love hill climb racing. I also have a car game. I would like to buy clicks or installs directly from you. And then they can say, sure, let's go for that. So then you set up a deal. You use the third-party attribution software so that both parties can see how many users they have generated for each other, and then you just set up billing back and forth. Then you can go to a display-focused ad network, and an ad network is a company who has already done sort of the direct deals with 1,000 games and 100,000 mobile websites. So they have access to inventory, and they're bidding on buying it on a real-time bidding basis as well. They're using algorithms and advanced analytics to try and maximize their own part. And if you go to them, you say, well, hey, I want to buy either clicks or I want to buy installs. And then they go out within their network of games, mobile websites, all of these things. And they place your ad for you. You still use a third-party attribution software so that both parties can see how many users have been generated. It's very common right now, and there's a lot of companies who are only working with CPI. So they tell you, I will deliver you users at a fixed price. Tell me how much you're willing to pay for a user, and I will deliver users to you at that volume. So there's some really big networks that are doing that. There's one out of Germany called Hitfox. That's pretty much all they do. And they then say, I mean, they to a point assume the risk. Or actually, they don't really take risk, because if you go to them and say, I want to buy users for $3, they go out and say, okay, we're going to buy users for less than $3 and sell them to these guys for $3. So then it becomes kind of a basic arbitrage economy thing for them, where they try to get your users for you under the price you are willing to pay, so they make a profit. But if you take a step back and you think about that, and it's one exercise that I always do, and I found it to be very useful, and that is life advice. It works in real life as well. assume that the person you're working with is an asshole who's trying to screw you over. And try to be evil and try to figure out, if I were an asshole and I tried to screw myself over, what would I do? So for instance, if I'm willing to pay $3 for a user, or this person is willing to pay me $3 for a user, if I want to make the most possible money short term, what do? I get the cheapest possible, the cheapest users I can, and I buy them for 50 cents and I sell them to this guy for $3. I make $2.50 per user, I deliver 10,000 users per day, I'm making a shit ton of money. So that's why you usually the lower you pay, the worse quality users you get. Because a lot of the game, especially if you're buying in-game traffic, a lot of companies are filtering their traffic. So if you have a free-to-play game, they only show ads for other games to players who never monetize, which is something you have good analytics, super simple to set this up. So that's what a lot of companies do. It's not necessarily anything evil by doing that. Like Supercell do it in an extremely good way. So if you play Heyday and you never monetize, after a while, more and more ads start showing up. And you start seeing ads in the newspaper and the movie ticket shows up. But if you have spent more than a certain amount of money, you're very likely never going to see those ads. Supercell says, haha, here's one of the 5%. We're going to make sure that this person plays as much as possible of our game. We don't want this person to know that there are other games out there. We're not going to show this person any ads. And again, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Everyone does it. We're going to be doing it as well. But that's one of the the cycle of crap traffic that is very easy to get stuck in. You pay money to get users that never monetize. And then you yourself, you sell them on to someone else, but you make much less money from it. Something that I find very interesting is that there are virtually, I can't name any user acquisition agencies or companies who are willing to work on a revenue share basis, which is a very good litmus test. If someone, I used to do that all the time back at Vuga when we were doing Facebook, because with Facebook, if you're doing a Facebook game, you don't have the attribution issues. Everything is 100% transparent. You can see every single user exactly where they came from, which ad, which network. There is no sort of overlap or confusion that you get on the mobile platforms. So my litmus test was always to go to everyone, because you get approached by hundreds of these if you're a CMO of a game company, and your LinkedIn becomes your biggest source of anxiety because there's always 500 companies wanting to sell you the same crap. So what I always used to do before is say, oh, I'd love to work with you. Let's do rev share. You get a percentage of the money you generate for me. And like magic, they all disappear. None of them wants to do that. The dirty secret is I don't want to do that either, because I will probably end up losing money by doing so. The people who spend money in my game, they spend a disproportionate amount, they spend big amounts. I don't want to share that. And sharing a percentage of 0, no one benefits from. But it's a very good test to see how confident are the people who are approaching you, trying to sell you something. How confident are they in their product? By saying, how about let's do rev share? You give me users, I give you a percentage of the money they generate. And a lot of them will go, nah, no, we can't, we don't, blah, 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 blah. Just means that they know they're selling crap. And there's a lot of companies out there who are selling crap. My rule of thumb, and this comes from many years of experience, it's very hard to say, please don't tweet this because it can be interpreted in a very wrong way, and please don't be offended in any way. But I have come to the conclusion that I'm not working with Israeli companies. I have worked with a lot of them, and every single one of them has delivered me nothing but crap. And they are extremely good at it, but I have gotten to the point now where my phone calls and it's country code 972, I'm not answering. It's become a waste of my time. There's a lot of, overall really bad and cheeky companies out there who try to do a bunch of different stuff from all over the world. So it's not by any means, it's just that Israel happens to have a very high concentration of these companies. So now there's going to be tweets that CMO of Grand Crew is anti-Semitic. So I'm not at all. Shalom. The other thing that maybe I should elaborate a little bit on was that I said that if you are a startup starting out today, if you're small and you're not funded, I don't think you should make free-to-play games. And that I stand by 100%. I was told that most other people say the exact opposite, but again, it comes down to this. If you want to do free-to-play games, there are 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 is you make an insanely good game where people love it so much they're just throwing money at you and you don't really have to worry about analytics or anything like that. You just make such a good game that people keep throwing money at you. I've still never seen this happen. Maybe one could argue that Clash of Clans almost was that. I don't think Supercell, I don't think anyone, but I don't even think Supercell realized how crazy much money people will spend in Clash of Clans, which ended up being a good thing. So, that worked out quite nicely. But the Supercell is extremely talented people. They worked on the game for a long time, and they had a very iterative design process, and it's an extremely well-designed game as well. So it doesn't really fit into the category of make an amazing game, people will give you so much money that you don't have to care about analytics. But if you've come across any game or company like that, please let me know. The other scenario is that you then have to, from day one, even before you launch your game, you have to have a very good analytics framework built in. You have to have people in your company who are very good at analytics, and those people don't come cheaply. If you're a small game studio, you're starting out, it's your first game, these people are going to cost money. And it's very hard to find them as well. There's not that many people who know this and sort of are confident in dealing with these metrics, setting up these tracking systems and doing it. So that makes it very tough. The third option, and that's the thing that happened to us, and it's the thing that happens to a lot of companies in Finland, is you have such a good team that you actually get a lot of funding so you can afford to do this. So I was hired as the CMO. I'm not one of the founders of Grand Crew. I joined again after the first financing round. And they could afford to get me a year and a half before we started actually doing anything properly with the game. Then, of course, I have other skill sets. I'm nice, I'm Swedish, and etc. So that, of course, helps. There's a premium for that, especially here in Finland, I'm told. But that's sort of the other thing that you can do with it. But if you're small and you're starting out, if you do a premium game, and especially if you consider yourself somewhat of an artist or a game connoisseur or someone who really loves games and have an awesome idea for a cool game, premium, I think, is a much better way to go. And there are, to me, many more successful companies that started out doing premium games to build revenues and then, after some point, started merging towards free-to-play games. Rovio is a good example. The latest I heard was that they said they are never going to make a premium game again. I don't know if that still holds, but I heard it sometime before Angry Birds Go. And this is a company who has built up hundreds of millions of revenue, very talented people, a good infrastructure by doing premium games. Another good example of people who are more game nerds and not necessarily business people or startup-y people who want to build a growing, scalable business. A company of people who aren't thinking too much in terms of metrics. They're more thinking of how do we make a really awesome game, or I've had this idea for a game for 5 years and I really want to make it. There's more companies like that. I'd say, for instance, my favorite game for the past, I started playing it very late. I'm very late to the game, but it's by far the game I play the most now besides Supernauts, Plague Inc. It's by a UK-based company called Endemic Creations. Awesome game if you haven't played it. It's really speaks to the psychotic killer in me, because all you do is you design a virus that's supposed to knock out humanity, and then you mutate it, and it's super fun. And you go and you learn to hate 3 countries, Madagascar, Greenland, and Iceland, because it's so hard to get your virus to those countries. So, goddamn Icelandic people. But so those were sort of touching points connecting to before about getting to there. Maybe the other thing I should say about making premium games as well is today more than ever, it's actually cheaper to make a game. More and more of the technologies you need to do it are either open source, they're free. Unity are throwing away licenses, and there's a lot of competition in that if you want to work with sort of a game creation engine. Most of the knowledge has become incredibly democratized. I'm far too dumb to do any programming, but if you're smart enough to do it, I mean, you know, bloody hell, you can learn from Wikipedia or take online courses. So I mean, the entry barriers are actually much lower to get to that point, and they don't require financial investment. Free-to-play games requires financial investment. Maybe that's the simplest way to put it.
Excuse me. I have this statistics here. This is a report from last year by Distima, and it's saying that over 90% of the revenue generated by apps were generated by free apps.
Yeah.
And like over 90% of
Yeah. Sure, but you know, it's a what, $15 billion market.
Right. So you say that this 10% is still enough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, I mean, if you're making premium game, you can be a company of 10 people who put out one game every year, and if that game makes 2 million, awesome. I mean, fine. You won't be able to buy a Ferrari after 6 months, and in terms of sort of exit strategy, which is also, I mean, if we're getting into the corporate side of things as well, I mean, free-to-play companies now, especially in the wake of the Supercell with a $3 billion valuation, a valuation that quadrupled in 5 months, even though one can argue that the 750 million valuation they got in April last year was very low valuated. But I mean, there's a little bit of a race there as well. So a lot of people are saying like, well, okay, we'll make a game, we'll make a Clash of Clans kind of game, we'll make revenues, and then someone's going to buy us for 3 billion and we'll drink champagne for breakfast. So you probably won't get that by doing a premium game, but I would argue that you probably have a higher chance of success of, you know, living your life as an owner of a game company or being a game designer, doing stuff. And I think it also, and now we're getting into a bit off topic, but it's a very fun topic, at least I think so. I mean, the other thing about free-to-play games and this iterative design where you test things, by its very definition, it leads you towards the lowest common denominator. Right? You want to make something that appeals to as many people as possible, which tends, I mean, you know, at some point, I mean, you can make this argument. If someone here from Rovio, right? So I mean this in a very nice way. One can make the argument is that if Rovio was a restaurant, it would be McDonald's. Probably not famous for maybe the quality of the food or etc., but they're actually making something that 1 billion people per day consume and appreciate, which is not something you can say about a fancy gourmet restaurant. So if you want to be a fancy gourmet restaurant, well then maybe you should make a cool little indie game, or you know, do something that's a bit more unique where you don't have to have the constant pressure of having iterative design, trying to just always go towards, you know, I mean, Zynga is another good example of that. Like Zynga got crazy with iterative design, and you can sort of see it in the quality of their games, how just everything came towards design for the lowest common denominator. Do something that everything likes, and then you end up probably doing something that no one likes because it becomes so bland. And you can see it in the graphic style and in the communication style and all of those things. So that's why I think premium is a bit better.
Do you think the audience will also be saturated? Because it says that like the revenue share of these premium games have increased something like 20% from the year before. So you would think that maybe there is some sort of counter reaction.
Could very well be. Yeah, and I mean, you also, Distimo is a company that makes money by selling reports to free-to-play companies. Right. So, you know, some source critique, because there's so many, everyone's releasing these reports and they're charging a lot of money for them as well. They're full reports, and then they always, you know, they release 1 page of bullshit, and then you can pay a lot of money to get 100 pages of bullshit, but yeah. But I mean, it's going more, and I mean, I notice it in my, maybe I'm not the most representative person, but I spend more money on premium games than I do on free-to-play games. I tend to download more. I love the my inner psyche is being revealed, but I mean, I love these sniper games, whatever they're called, like with these stick figures where you just shoot people in the head. They're really fun, but they're also premium, so I end up doing that. I love the Plague Inc., Plants vs. Zombies. First one, I mean, I could talk for 2 hours why Plants vs. Zombies 2 should not have been a free-to-play game. I can guarantee you that Plants vs. Zombies 2 would have made more money as a premium game, but I mean, to sum it all up and to also move on in the presentation, I mean, there's a lot of hype with free-to-play games right now. And a lot of it is fueled by the insane success, first of Zynga, and now of Supercell. And sort of look, and you know, I mean, in the investment and venture capital aspect of it as well, because you can't underestimate that. I mean, that's a very strong driver. Money is a strong driver for a lot of people. And for people who are driven by money, free-to-play is much more interesting than premium, because free-to-play is I mean, it's a bit more of a lottery. If you win really big. So, yeah, premium is a bit more of a safer bet. You have a higher chance of succeeding, but the price won't be, your winnings won't be as great. But again, then you know, you have to trade that off. How important is it to have a Ferrari versus how important is it for you to have your artistic integrity and do a game that you are really proud of? And I mean, those things kind of balance in as well. Okay, back to the boring stuff, CPIs. So again, this is a little bit summarizing, and like I warned you before, I've been jumping all over the place. But you know, pre-click metrics is becoming virtually irrelevant. What happens before a user installs your game? How often your ad is seen? I haven't given a shit about conversion rates for ads for a year and a half, like it's, or actually longer. It really doesn't matter to me anymore. There are things that, you know, for every company you will find things that work really good for us. For us at Grand Crew, video works fantastic. So video is, for us, by far the most important user acquisition channel, because we have a game that looks really unique. Like and it looks kind of good. It has this kind of Pixar-y feel to it. It's 3D. The video creatives that we have done actually look quite good. We do music, we do some splash screens, so we have like really good looking videos. So we buy them on cost per view. And then we get really good click rates and we get really good download rates. So we actually, I mean, our CPIs in Canada have been really good for us. Much, much lower than the average thanks to that. But there's also a sort of there are diminishing returns for that. I mean, after a while, the newness of it disappears and it becomes saturated. Yep.
You say cost per view, you mean that the full view, or just like cost per impression per minute?
Yes. No, it's cost per view. Like you know, most.
For the 15 seconds though.
Well, yeah, I mean that's. You know, some video ad networks, they charge you for a completed view, and some charge you for a started view. So be careful which one you choose. And they tend not to differentiate in the prices, and there's a huge difference there. But again, I think for the last time, touch on the ROI part here. Even if you get a shitty user at a low CPI, it's still a shitty user. So that just means you ended up losing slightly more money on that user than you would have with a higher CPI. But you're not building a business by getting low CPIs anymore.
So you meant why aren't you buying on a CPI basis of video too?
Yeah, you can, but we don't, because for us it's much. We actually get it cheaper by buying on cost per view, because our conversion rates are so high that you know, let's say I'm making these numbers up, but let's say on average 5% of all views lead to an install. For us it's 15 or 20%. So, and we still pay the same price per view, so our CPIs just become quite low because of that. So we're getting very efficient in our video advertising.
Would it somehow change the way how you would bid or how you pay? Would it change the way how you're shown in the inventory or in the apps, and hence like maybe affect your users and the LTV, like when and to whom they're shown?
Yeah, well, we do targeting. Right now, you can't do that much targeting. I mean, on Facebook, if you do a mobile app installed video ads, the worst product name ever, but the greatest product Facebook has ever released, you can do a lot of targeting. So, you know, I can, for our game, Supernauts, I can say, show this game to people who like Minecraft, and my conversions are going to go through the roof. Because our game looks like Minecraft, but if Pixar made it. So then the Minecraft people go bananas and like, holy shit, I'm going to have to download that. So you do that. Often you can do some level of targeting. So you can say, you know, show this game. Yeah, I can say, for instance, I don't want Supernauts to be shown in puzzle games like Candy Crush or Jelly Splash, because those users probably won't convert. I want my video ads to be shown in free-to-play games with an economy, with an element of grind. So you can specify that. But most won't let you specify down to specific actual games. So you can't say, I want to show this ad in Angry Birds Go and nowhere else. Most ad networks won't let you do that. Or also the publishers don't want to give that information away. Yeah, again, iterating, analytics, analytics, analytics. I said it before, our partners that we work with for user acquisition, our key partners, they are not advertising companies, they are data companies who happen to be doing advertising. So my favorite company is Fixu, half Finnish company, their CEO is half Finnish, so that's why they have the smart name. Virtually, they have a lot of, they're based in Boston, so most of the people at Fixu don't know what Fixu means, which is always fun when you meet them. But those are the kinds of companies who are on a daily basis delivering billions of impressions and storing all that. So they can also then, they have the unique user information. So they know on an anonymized level, this is a user who has clicked on Minecraft ads. Maybe we should try and show Supernauts ads to this user because we know this user clicked on Minecraft ads. So you get that kind of level of analytics from it. Yeah, and again, forget about Mad Men. But watch it, but forget about it, because that stuff doesn't happen anymore, not in this business. And I think overall it's not going to be happening in marketing or advertising at all, at a sort of at a fairly long scale. Like I said, I spent 50 million doing TV advertising, so I really know what a global scam TV advertising is. Like, it's one of the biggest and most fraudulent bullshit industries you can ever imagine. They have no idea what's happening. And we saw that. Since we could measure the ads, we could actually say, well, this ad was effective, this wasn't, this time slot is good, this is bad. The media agencies have no idea, and they have no interest in this. And they are dead scared of video advertising being shifted from TV into Facebook. And I mean, that's what Facebook wants the most. Facebook, they don't want to take money from Google. Well, they do, but I mean, it's not their goal to take money from Google. Facebook's goal is to take money from the TV stations. Because every time I see a tampon commercial, a marketer has failed miserably because it's not a product for me. Every time a woman sees an ad for Gillette, someone has failed completely. And on Facebook, you can actually do that. So you get much more value from your views. And that's where I think Facebook is very much moving towards becoming a video advertising platform. And they're probably going to be the world leader in a couple of years doing that. I saw some hands. No? Okay. So let's talk about LTV. Enough about CPIs. So it has been my experience, both from Grand Crew and from Vuga, but also from friends in other companies in the industry, that the marketing team can be extremely useful in working with the game designers and the product managers to help improve lifetime value. Because we tend to be the people who it's always tricky, but I mean, we tend to think about things slightly differently and see things from a different point of view than the game designers, who tend to think about game loops and what happens here and what happens there. Marketing people or business development people can have, especially marketing and business development people who are game nerds and who love games. And I mean, inside of me, there's a small game designer, but I know I'm not good enough to do it, but I really like game design. I've been playing games since I was 7 years old, so I've learned a lot, but I know that I couldn't design my own game, but I'm pretty good at seeing areas of improvement in other games and where things can be done. And this is why I think it's very important that marketing and the game design teams and the game product management teams work very closely together. You should apply pretty much the same analytics as you do for user acquisition. You should apply for in-game with a strong focus on return on investment. Segment your users, even the organic ones that you're just getting from, free downloads. Segment these, get demographical data, figure out who are the people who are spending money in your game, when are they doing it, why are they doing it, what are they spending money on, are they buying hats for their avatars, are they expanding their world, are they speeding up the constructions. Really understand that. So it's very important, and this is something that virtually all really successful free-to-play companies do. They are very open internally with their data, which can lead to stuff like happened to Supercell earlier in the week, but still, I mean, at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. But it's really good to have open data, so everyone in the company, down to an intern, can go in and look and see what's happening, when are people monetizing, give people access to the data, make sure that everyone in your company knows your analytics system, make sure that everyone in the company is comfortable with Excel. If they want to check something out, take some data dumps, put it in there, play around with it, and it sort of encourage people to do it. And it helps you in your game design as well. Our level designer, who does virtually all of the missions for Supernauts, she has become addicted to our analytics tool, because in that tool she can see how long does it take to complete an average missions, how many times people try before they do it. So it has become incredibly valuable for her when she's designing and optimizing the missions to be able to immediately go in and look at that data. So even though she's a designer now, she is, you know, more and more looking at data and saying, okay, this mission is too hard. After 5 minutes, people stop playing this mission, and then she goes to the mission and says, okay, they probably get to that part. When that's probably around the time when they drop out. Maybe I should change something, make it simpler, and do that to allow people to get more through it. So analytics, analytics, analytics. Yes, okay. The final slide and the final topic, which hopefully ties everything together quite nicely, and I've touched on it before, is in-game advertising. Because this is the perfect marriage of marketing and game, when you're actually using your game to advertise something to make money. So this is where the holistic part of it all comes together in the very best way. So again, I am a strong proponent of, if you are doing in-game marketing, the marketing team should be, or sort of in-game monetization through ads. I am a strong believer in that the marketing team should be one in control of it. It's all a collaboration, but they should be the one running it, dealing with the partners, looking at the metrics and optimizing it and making the very most of it. Because here again, you need to have a marketing mindset. You need to be analytical about it. And you need to understand what to look at. When should we show ads? Does it make sense to show ads even to people who monetize? Can we A/B test this and build on all those things? I'm also a huge fan of making the game design, making the in-game advertising part of the game design and part of the game narrative. And the best example I have seen of this, and it's a very fun story as well, is, again, it's Heyday. Like, I love Heyday. I think Heyday is a much better game than Clash of Clans. I got bored with Clash of Clans quite quickly, but still now, after a year and a half, I still enjoy Heyday. Every time I see the pigs with their animation, I start laughing. It's a great game. And I think it's actually, I also think it's much more innovative than Clash of Clans. But Clash of Clans has some other really good things going for it as well. But so what they did and this is hearsay, so I haven't seen the actual data, but it's what I've heard. So what they did in Heyday is when a user had reached a certain level and never monetized, they said, well, okay, this player has played the game for 2 weeks, they have never monetized. We know from our analytics and looking at it, the likelihood of a player who has played for 2 weeks and never monetized that they will start monetizing is virtually zero. So in a way, currently, the lifetime value of these users are 0. So then they said, well, okay, let's start showing ads to them then, so we get some money. Because even though, I mean, it still costs you a little bit to have a user. It's, you know, server space, customer care. It's very incremental costs, but at some point, you know, it starts playing a part of it. So what they did, they started putting video ads in the game. And they designed it in a great way. Like, we're going to make it even better in Supernauts. I know I've been waiting for like a year and a half to do it, and I know exactly how I'm going to do it. But we can't do it yet because we have to get the game ready and launched and blah, 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 blah. But what they did in Heyday was, all of a sudden, right next to your mailbox, if you envision that it looks like, next to your mailbox, all of a sudden a movie ticket appeared. And people, they didn't tell anything about it. It wasn't like some annoying banner or anything that popped up. It was just a movie ticket that appeared in the game, and it was glowing a little bit. And then when you clicked it, it said, hey, if you watch this video, you will get 4 diamonds or gems or whatever they use. And people started, of course, like, oh, wow, 4 diamonds. I can speed up my bacon production. Awesome. So people started watching the videos. And Heyday was such a big and popular game when they did these trials that people started doing it so much that the company that delivered the videos to them actually ran out of videos to show. So what happened was that their customer care pretty much got flooded with people saying, where the hell is the movie ticket? I want to watch more videos. Where did my videos go? And if you think about it, if you're in a situation where your customers are asking you to show them more marketing, you have done a pretty good job. And this had a pretty big impact on their overall lifetime value. Normally, the consensus is if you add in-game advertising, you can increase your lifetime value or your ARPDAU with maybe 10%. Thereabouts, 15 if you do it well. But I think that this number will continue to increase. I think in a year or two, there will be very good and very highly profitable games who make 25% of their revenues by showing video ads. If you do it well. If you force people to do it, it becomes very annoying. But if you take now the Aalto company, they have stopped doing all in-game advertising. They did a lot of it before, but they pulled it back. Probably because they're preparing for the IPO and they want to they think that Candy Crush is going to be pretty much the next Tetris. Like Candy Crush is a game people will play in 20 years. It's going to be t-shirts and da. So they're they're very good at it as well, thinking of the brand thing. So that's why I said, we can show ads and make 500,000 per day. Why bother? We're making enough money. Let's actually try and increase the value of the product we have instead of just cashing in a little bit of money here and there. But if you think of a game like Candy Crush, you run out of lives. If something pops up, hey, if you watch this video, you will get another life. Awesome. Right? Who wouldn't want to do that? And you actually wouldn't be annoyed by it. If when the game starts up and says, hey, the game is loading, in the meantime, look at this video ad, it's much more annoying. And that's the difference between, what I call the best way to describe it is the difference between push and pull. Right? What you want to do is you want to have pull advertising where your users pull it. So they say, I want to see it, give it to me. You don't want to have push advertising where you say, here's an ad, look at it. So design it in a nice way. Make sure you take enough time from graphic artists and developers and make it look really nice and as an organic part of the game experience. And then the final part here, which is also a very big debate. You need to incentivize your users to watch the ads. Give them something in thanks for doing it, so they will keep doing it, which is fairly straightforward. But the question is, what should you be giving them? And there are two schools of thought here. Because most of the free-to-play games, right, you have hard currency and soft currency. I'm sure one of maybe Aki or someone who was talking about free-to-play design mentioned that, right? Soft currency you earn in the game by grinding. Hard currency you can only get by spending real money. So should you give your players hard currency? By doing so, you probably forever eliminate the need for them to spend any money. Unless you have dramatically increasing costs and a hockey stick progression curve. Or do you give them soft currency, stuff to just keep them from having to grind for too long? Or do you give them unique items? Maybe you should give them something from watching videos that they can't get by spending money or grinding. And I'm amazed that I can't think of any company actually that does this. But that's one of the things we're going to do. If you watch video ads, you can get something you can't get any other way. And if you do it like that, you can actually show these ads to people who are already spending money without in any way cannibalizing them. Just give them unique stuff. And I'm a big believer that this will pay off, that this is a very, very much the way things will be going. As TV spend is merging from the really, really stupid TV box that knows nothing about you or views or anything like that into the much, much smarter either computers, mobile phones or tablets where users tend to be more engaged. Maybe they even have the sound put off or anything like that, but they are much more focused on it. And if you have gotten the pull, so the user actually say, show me something. And the other maybe final thing as well, like a lot of people complain about marketing and say marketing is horrible and it's stupid, and in many ways it is. But good marketing is actually really relevant. Like, if you get shown something that you actually want, that's great. Which is why, I mean, I like music, not so much here in Helsinki, because nothing happens here. Well, in terms of, like, I love going to concerts. Live music is one of the favorite things I like to do in my free time. And I like to play golf. Those are my two things. So on my Facebook, because I know how Facebook works, I actually liked a bunch of golf pages, and then I make sure to like all of the bands that I like. All of my music groups. I like their pages and I make sure to populate my profile with that information so smart marketers can actually show me relevant stuff. So on my Facebook, I get a lot of suggestions for golf trips or golf equipment or whatever it might be, which is actually relevant to me. Or I get information about upcoming concerts, which is also very relevant to me. And if you get relevant advertising, it doesn't feel like advertising. Then it actually becomes information, and it's not annoying, and you actually start appreciating it. So figure out a smart way to do it, and it will go really well. And with that, if there are any questions.
You mentioned about giving some items, some unique stuff for the users who watch the video instead of currency, right? So wouldn't that maybe create the problem that you need to create a whole bunch of different kinds of items?
Yeah, exactly. And then that's the argument why people don't do it. But my argument is it will be worth doing it. Like if you do, again, let's use Candy Crush because it's a very simple example. And you know how the map works in every different lands. You know, make 5 levels that you can only get to by watching video ads. Make it unique. Make a special booster that you only get from watching video ads. For every 10 ads you watch, you get a special booster. You can't buy it, you can't earn it, you can't do anything like that. And if you make it a booster, well then you actually just have to make it once. If it's, you know, you get unique hats, fine. But still at the end of the day, if you want to give different hats to your characters or avatars, I mean, it just comes down to having a graphics guy or girl make a bunch of them. Or bloody hell, I mean, you can outsource it to someone in Malaysia or Indonesia that does it really quickly. You can even get it from the community if you get a popular enough game. But then you leverage that. Yep.
Do people, when people watch in-game video advertisements, do they convert at 50%, or do you have any info on that?
I mean, it depends on what you're advertising. First of all, how good is your targeting? So if we show ads for our game inside of a game that there's a fairly good chance that if you like this game, you will like that game, converts pretty well. So you know, it comes down to how much targeting you do, and you can optimize on that as well. Yep.
Do you have an opinion also on non-video advertisement or product placements or things like that?
Product placement, I think it's complete crap. I guess people don't care. And there's been examples. Playdom is a company who make Facebook games. They were acquired by Disney. And then Disney said, let's do something. And they had a city builder game. And they said, OK, let's put Disney characters as statues. And it's like, this is crap. And like they made a deal with Toyota so you could have a Toyota store. Like, it doesn't work. People don't care about it. It's not enough money in it. So there was some hype around it maybe 2-3 years ago. Sort of at the peak of the Facebook gaming bubble, or not bubble, but sort of in the hype cycle of it, where a lot of companies were interested in doing this, but at least not, there's no sustainable value coming from it if you're a developer. You know, the majority of the mobile advertising today, the vast majority are banners. But I don't like them. They're very boring. It's hard to do something good with them. I think they're more it's harder to get pull banners. So the banners is almost by its nature push. You show it there, it pops up or something.
Media where you can actually interact with the app.
Yeah, I don't like that either. It's too complicated. Videos to me, especially for games, videos is a perfect thing. I can watch a 15-second video, and if that video is good, I will have a very good idea of, will I like this game, yes or no? And if I know that I won't, I'm not installing it. And if people who won't like my game don't install it, I'm actually happy. I don't want to have I don't want to get installs just to get up the charts or whatever. That's also a little bit, I mean, first of all, it's so hard to have sustainable chart position unless you're Supercell or the asshole company. Very few, I mean, Rovio, they release something, it stays up there for a while, but it's very hard to have it sustained in a long run, especially in the download charts. There it's virtually impossible. In the grossing charts you can, because there you're relying on incumbent users. If you already have 10 million users who are spending money, yes, you have you're going to be on the top grossing charts. The download charts are very much influenced by new stuff. So, of course, it has a value to be on top there because you will get an additional, even more downloads. But you can't really drive there. Again, if you look at the ROI part of it, like if you want to spend your way to the top position of the download charts, you're very likely going to have a very poor ROI unless your game monetizes extremely well. Yep.
Do you have any tips for doing marketing for a small premium game? You are so much in favor of it.
Well, my probably biggest tip, because even if you're a premium game, if you're a good premium game, you can still show ads in the game. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So my tip would be either you do traffic trades, something like Chart Boost, where you give users away and you get users back. And traffic trades works extremely well if your game is better than the other game. Because then you're basically plugging a host in there and you're pumping users into your game and they're going to stay there because your game is better. The other thing I would really recommend is to do direct deals. Try and find games that are somewhat similar to yours. Contact the developers and say, hey, love your game, big fan, we're a small studio in Finland. I would love to, I have 10,000 bucks to spend. I would love to spend it inside your game. Could you sell me users from these 5 countries? I'll pay you per user. Or you can also, with the premium games, it's much easier to do revenue share. You can also, publishers for free-to-play games, I really don't like. Because it breaks, again, your business model is you hit it big or you don't. And if you hit it big, you don't need a publisher. If you don't, a publisher is not going to help you. But for premium games, you can still go with the publishers. Like Rovio Stars is amazing. I have bought every single Rovio Stars game because they're actually really good. Like Icebreaker, Tiny Thief. It was a beautiful game, but it maybe wasn't that fun. But for me, Rovio Stars has a lot of value now. Like I've downloaded 3 or 4 games from there. I like them all. It's a very simple thing for Rovio to do. They can leverage it because they have so much inventory. They have billions of impressions per day. So why not spend it publishing other premium games and do more from there? So I would definitely consider going with a publisher. A publisher can also help you if you're a premium game to localize and then do the revenue share. So you're selling some value of your, in a way you're selling the value of your company in a little bit, but it can really help you to where you need to go. The one thing you need to make sure of though, and that's always the fight when you deal with publishers, you need to make sure you own the IP. So they don't say, okay, sure, we'll publish your game, but if you sign here, I want to own your IP. So I would never, ever do, unless you know the game sucks. And you're like, that happens. With most games, you find out this game actually sucks. And you spent a lot of money on it. It's like, well, I'm going to try and make the most out of it, cut my losses, do whatever. Fine, then sell away the IP. But other than that, I wouldn't do it. Oh, yep.
What about in-game advertising? Again, does it work better for virtual goods like games, or does it work also for physical goods? Like I think nowadays most of the ads what I'm seeing is other games or some virtual goods or something.
Yeah.
Do you think that the proportion will change, that cars will be sold through in-game ads?
Well, not sold, but advertised. Yeah. It'd be kind of cool if you could buy a Mercedes through the App Store, though. But no, absolutely, maybe not so much with banners, but with video for sure. Because again, if you're a video advertiser, again, you're selling. Sorry to go on with tampons. It's not an obsession, but to me, tampons are very clear. Like it's something that is relevant for females between X and Y. Like that's the target group for people who are interested in buying tampons. So then you can go to any game company and say, hey, I want to show this ad to women who are between these age groups. And you have a 100% relevancy rate. If you go to, even if you go to one of the TV stations here in Finland and say, they're going to say, yeah, sure, advertise on whatever channel, Jim or whatever, and say, oh, and, advertise on How I Met Your Mother. It's 65% of the people who are watching are women. But they still don't really know that. They're estimating it based on small samples and just based on making assumptions. But if you do it and you push it online, you get 100% relevancy. So yeah, and it's happening more and more, and it's one of the things that are also driving up CPI prices overall right now, is that more and more brands are starting to do video advertising particularly on the iPad, but also on the iPhones and Android. But I mean, they are focusing a bit more on tablets because the screen is bigger, resolution is nicer, you can do more with it. And it's annoying because it increases your user acquisition prices, but it's also really good because it can increase your lifetime value. So more and more of that will start happening for sure, and I think it's going to be have a very positive impact on the industry overall. Last question? Oh, okay. Well, but that was a good question to end on. Thanks.